The views expressed on the following program are not necessarily those of WPSL. However, we do encourage you to like and share them on Facebook and other social media. And if you want to know what's going on and what's happening, you need to tune in to the Sue Ellen Sanders Show. You're just in time right now. Here's Sue Ellen Sanders.
Welcome to the Sue Ellen Sanders Show. And this is actually one of my happy workplaces because it's been my workplace for coming up to 20 years now. Unbelievable, but true. And that's why I think when I first heard that Wendy Conrad's business name was Your Happy Workplace, I thought, oh, this is someone I need to hear more from, because there's so many people that just drag themselves to work or in today's COVID-19 pandemic world, drag themselves to the computer. And you don't really enjoy what you're doing. It doesn't excite you. And Wendy, the last time you were here, you had the chance to talk to us about, how to create that happy workplace, whether you're the boss or whether you're the employee. So welcome.
Thanks for having me back, Sue Ellen.
I'm glad you're here. And the last time we had you on was right at the beginning. It was in March, right? Right at the beginning of the pandemic.
I think coronavirus wasn't really on my radar yet.
Yeah. So we were still
right
talking about office stuff.
Yes.
And people keep saying right now, well, if we knew how long this was going to be, it would be better. And yeah, it would be. But no, we don't. We don't know. We just don't know. And who would have thought back in March when things were starting to rapidly shut down that would be still kind of in that place in the summertime. So is it a little bit more challenging now to have a happy workplace?
Well, that depends who you ask. I mean, there's a lot of, I think, business owners and employers and managers who maybe were resistant to remote working before this all kind of happened. And I think with younger generations coming into the workforce who are, I don't want to say demanding, but asking about more flexibility in their work schedules and how they work, and maybe got a little bit of pushback on that before the coronavirus hit. And now we were kind of thrust into this situation against our will. And so
a little bit of, see, I told you so.
Right. And so businesses who maybe had remote teams before maybe have made that adjustment seamlessly, and businesses who maybe were a little resistant to the idea of remote work might have been stumbling around, in the dark in terms of transitioning their team. So if the latter is the case, then yes, there is more effort involved, a lot more communication, and just kind of tweaking your processes and how you work. And when you're doing that under the stressful situation of what we're dealing with now, it can make it that much harder. So it just kind of depends how you were working before. But I think no matter if you were working remotely before or not, we're all doing things differently now.
It is true, because even if you're still in the same workplace you were, say you're working in an office that doesn't have a lot of public exposure, and you're working in retail and wearing a face mask, and or working as a in a situation where you didn't have a choice to work from home, you still have to have that attitude of what makes your workplace, wherever your workplace is, a better place. And your coworkers may have changed, or you perhaps you just don't see them. They're still your coworkers, but uh, the whole Zoom phenomenon, where at the beginning when we first started doing it with the meetings, everybody was so excited to see everybody's face that you could have a meeting with 20 or 25 people and everyone was putting their face up there, and then we were doing all those cute little backgrounds and everything, space and the beach and different places like that, and we're kind of over that now.
Zoom fatigue, they call it.
There's a name
Zoom
for it,
fatigue.
really?
Yes, I have it myself. I think kind of the novelty's worn off a little bit. And in the beginning, what we thought would maybe be a few weeks or a month or maybe 2 months has now turned into an undetermined amount of time. And so that kind of adds a little bit to the stress. But yes, in the beginning it was kind of fun. Oh, look, we're at home and we're all attending this meeting from home and this is fun, and look at my roller coaster background and but now that we're kind of settled in, it can and working from home has its own separate challenges.
I'm way too close to the refrigerator. I'm just going to go on record as saying that.
Yeah. And especially for people who have never worked from home before, to make this kind of fast and hard transition under a pandemic situation where they may have children at home, they may have other family members at home who have lost a job or who have health issues or who are working from home also. All of these things are all happening at the same time. And so to navigate through all of that at once can be challenging for people. And especially now when it's been going on for so long, if you don't have the support of your team, and this pandemic, like you said, affects different industries differently. Some people cannot do their job from home. If you're working for a restaurant or someone in retail or something like that where it's not possible. So there's all these things going on at once, and the solution isn't the same for everyone. So it's really just about communicating with your team about what's going on specifically with your team and figuring out, okay, here's our situation, who's going to work from home, can we work from home, how can we make this work, and how can we make it work well. It may not be the ideal situation right now, but it is what it is. So what can we do to make this work and make it work well?
And I think people's expectations that somebody has to be to blame, that when you look at it from the negative point of view, that it's somebody else's fault that you're not getting to go do what you did before, or you don't have a job, and I see a lot of the blame game going on. Some of it at a very serious, high level, and a political level, and some just at, the dog looking at me when I'm not leaving the house.
Yeah.
We worked from home for a couple of months, and then we went back into the office for a month, and then we just were all sent back to work from home again. And we have different departments at the Early Learning Coalition, and I think during the 2 months that we were home the first time, everybody pretty much proved that not only could they do a lot of their work via email, phone, and other media, but they did it well. And, in many cases, some of our clientele didn't even know whether we were in the office or not. And I think that that's kind of a good sign that we did it well. So this time, it was an easier decision for my boss to make. The first time, he kind of went back and forth and made the decision over a 2-week period. And this time it was like, okay, I know I have trust in that, my team is going to do what they say they're going to do. And I feel good about it, and it's the best thing for us. So, but the dogs, I was talking about the dogs, and I digress. Because the one dog was just like, get out of my face, why are you here? I do not want to take another walk.
Yeah.
But the younger of the two dogs, who just turned a year old, is delighted that I'm there. And she thinks that I'm there to play with her, or if I'm not there to play with her, she's going to sit underneath the dining room table that I have my computer station set up on. So much so that every once in a while I move my feet and I feel a little dog snout there. And, I'm really lucky, I guess. At the beginning, I was kind of lonely at home, and so I wasn't feeling lucky. I was kind of feeling a little jealous of my friends and coworkers who had younger children at home, because I thought, oh, that sounds like fun. What a great bonding experience with your family. And, you get to see what they're doing in their schoolwork, and you get a little of this and a little of that. But now I've kind of come full circle where I'm grateful that it's just the dogs.
I could give you some phone numbers of some people who might disagree with that perspective.
Well, I had some younger parents in the neighborhood that, I made the mistake of saying I'm jealous.
Yeah, I'm sure you got an earful there.
They often send their children.
It's all about our perspective, right? And our personalities. Me, as I consider myself an introvert, I was like, this is awesome.
You've been training for this your whole life.
I could sit at home with my dog. See, and I'm glad you brought up the dogs, because no one's talking about how this is affecting the pets of the world. I feel like if and when people do start going back to work, the pets are going to suffer and have a higher rate of separation anxiety. But that's another show, because I notice my dogs are becoming much more attached to me in terms of if I go to the other room, they're like Velcro. I mean, my older one always followed me, but my younger one's doing it now, and she never did that before. Yeah. So that's a whole nother show. But you said a lot of things there about working from home and transitioning and kind of making the second transition, and blame. I want to talk about that a little bit, because when you blame somebody, I think that you're giving someone else the power. And so if we kind of look at it from a perspective of what do I have control over right now, and what can I control, and why certain things are in place to keep other people safe and all of that stuff. But when you blame someone, you're giving them power. And so to think about, what can I do, okay, maybe I have to work at home right now. How can I make that the best situation it can be? What can I do for my team, for myself, for my employers? How can I make that the best situation? And I think coming at it from that angle is not only better for your own mental health, but for the whole team.
I agree. And, it's funny. I'm reflecting back on the beginning of this show, and the last time I had you on, which was pre-pandemic, we spent a little bit of time talking about what you actually do. And this time, because I know what you do, that I just jumped right in and started asking you questions about our workplace and making it a more pleasurable place to be. But let's back up just a little bit and talk about, I remember you saying the first time I had you on that you created this company, Your Happy Workplace, because you had worked for a lot of different organizations and had been in situations where you weren't happy.
Yes, yes. Your Happy Workplace is kind of was born out of working the past 20 years for 12 small businesses, feeling dissatisfied in those work cultures and wanting things out of work that I wasn't getting. And I think a lot of that, now that we have 5 generations in the workforce, and in the next 5 or 10 years, a majority of that workforce is going to be like Gen Xers and younger, those kind of generations are looking for things in the workplace like, what's my quality of life going to be here? How am I going to develop here as a person? Is this going to be an inspirational place for me to work? Is this a place I would want to work? And I think that idea for generations past is kind of foreign and almost scandalous in a way.
It is, because and I feel like I have a foot in several different generations, mostly because as the parent of 2 young adults, I hear their feedback and what they've done a lot, and that importance of beyond job satisfaction. But I'm also of the age, the boomer age, where I'm like thinking, I hear my mother's voice in my ear. You're lucky you have a job and you have a place to go and you get a paycheck, and you should just do what your boss says and stop complaining and trying to make things as good as they could be. Just do it.
How dare I want to be happy and inspired in the workplace? Oh my goodness.
And happy is such a nebulous word anyhow.
Yeah.
Because what's happy to you may not be happy to me.
Right. Right. And I'm glad that you said, you know, you hear your mother's voice saying you should just be happy to have a job and a paycheck. But if you're the boss or the employer and you're leading from that mindset, how do you think the team is going to feel that energy? Are they going to feel inspired to do better work if someone's leading from the mindset of you should just be happy you have a job and you're getting paid? Not anymore.
No.
Not anymore.
Yeah.
And
not
so
if you have a choice.
to resist that, it's the inevitable. It's happening, whether our minds want to change or not. And I'm like you. I kind of feel like I still hear the voices in my head, and I heard these voices before I started my business. And that's kind of how Your Happy Workplace came to be. I was on the couch, I remember, with my iPad, Googling questions that I didn't really expect answers to, like, is work supposed to suck? Am I supposed to be unhappy at my job? You know, I know Google's not going to give me the answer to that question, but let's just do it for, you know, for giggles.
Yes.
And that's kind of what led me down this rabbit hole of research about happiness in the workplace and companies that are doing it, and how that's affecting their bottom line, and how that's affecting the quality of work, and how that's affecting the quality of life for their team. So it's a win situation for everyone. And so that's why I couldn't understand why more people weren't doing it that way. You know, there's a science behind happiness and how it affects the brain and how it affects our creativity and our collaboration and our productivity. And so when you read all of those studies and that science, I couldn't figure out why more people weren't leading from that place. And so in my experience and my research of all of this, it's because we're socialized to think and accept work is supposed to suck. We all have mothers' voices in our head saying, just keep your head down, do your work, don't complain, you know, be glad you have a job. And I heard those voices too. And that's why when I was at my 12th job, ready to surrender and think, maybe I'm just supposed to hate work and work here for 20 years and then retire and then die. But deep down, I knew that that's not what I wanted for myself, and that's not what I wanted for other people. But I think because people who maybe start businesses buy into that socialization, not because they're bad people, but because they don't know any other way and they haven't seen any other example of how to do it differently and what that looks like and how that can inspire their team and how that can make their business better.
I think too, and you probably know better than I because you are in the field and experiencing it, but I think that there are a certain amount of bosses who feel like that's not business-like to try to make somebody happy, to address them as a whole person, that that is not the business-like way to be. And you do have the pushback from human resource associations who have, really for the last 10 or 20 years, they started this locally. The Treasure Coast Human Resource Association has the Best Places to Work awards that they give out. And so it's been a gradual thing. It wasn't a sudden thing, but at the same time, it was something that that if once human resources said it was true, then the bosses started to pay attention to it because they trusted somebody with that official title.
Yeah, and I experienced that pushback in just talking to people about what I do, even just saying the name of my business, Your Happy Workplace. Sometimes I could see smoke start to come out of people's ears because the words happy and work
Or they
are
do
in the
like
same
the little smirky
sentence.
face.
Like, what? That's, I've heard people say to me, happiness in the workplace is unrealistic. I talk to them about experiences I've had, bad experiences at toxic workplace. Oh, all workplaces are like that. And I'm never going to convince those people, and those people would never be my clients, and that's okay. That's fine because I get that. I get those mindsets, but I refuse to succumb to that. I believe, and I've seen, and I've experienced for myself. Listen, when I worked at my last job that was so toxic, we could do 5 shows on just that one experience alone. But when I quit that job,
what made it toxic, though? What were the top 5 reasons it was toxic?
From day one, I saw red flags. I have pages and pages of notes of things that happened at that workplace. But the tipping point came for me, and I don't know if we talked about this last time, but the tipping point came for me when I overheard my boss tell another employee through paper-thin office building walls that my quality of life didn't bleep matter.
I remember that story. I wasn't sure if it was you that told me that, but it stuck with me.
And that I didn't make the rules, and some more obscenities. Mm-hmm. And so for me, in that moment, there was no choice to be made anymore. I chose myself, that no person should have to work in a place where they're treated and thought of as just a part in a machine. And I'm glad you brought up the concept of not being full human beings at work, because I think part of everything that's happening in the world now is kind of fast tracking the idea that resisting that we are whole people and resisting allowing our team to be whole people at work is a mistake, because when we come to work, we're mothers, we're fathers, we're sons, we're daughters, we're people who have health problems, we're people who have partners who have lost jobs, we're people who have elderly
left
parents.
Watermelon in the car.
Left watermelon in the car. We're people who, have elderly parents who are sick. And we bring all of that to work, and that is reflected in how we work. And to ask our team to shut off our humanity as soon as they punch the clock is inhumane. And so rather than come from that space, go to the other space of, I see you, I recognize you, I understand that you have this going on in your life, and let's talk about how we can work around that in your schedule. And that is such a foreign concept to people, but I just wish I could show how much impact that would have on your team and how they work and the kind of work that they're doing and the kind of ideas they're bringing to the table for you.
So let me talk for a minute about a couple different types of team dynamics. So 20, maybe 15 years ago, I worked in a newspaper office, and so there were different departments, and there were a lot of different people that were, some of them were like always on deadline, so they were already stressed, and some of them were always wondering if they were going to close the deal, and so their paycheck was tied to that phone call or to that call. So there were a lot of different people that were under different types of stress. And there was that one person who they worked on the news side, but they weren't a news reporter. And I don't want to go into too much detail because I don't want them to be identified. But they were like, when you saw this person coming, if you had an office door, you kind of like kicked it shut.
Yeah.
Because they were just so low key and so conversational, and they had the type of job that wasn't deadline oriented. Once they had done what they needed to do, they were just kind of taking up space until it was 5 o'clock and time to go home. Whereas other people were trying to get what they could do done and feel like their time was very valuable. And so this was like, or there were other people who didn't have office doors that could shut, that they would pick up phones when they saw
Fake phone calls, I call that.
Yes, yeah. And God bless him. It was a young man. And I really don't think that he ever knew about the fake phone calls and about the doors shutting. And, he kind of went the other direction. He was like a time and place sucker. He wasted people's time. He was the person that you didn't want to run into at the proverbial water cooler, because then you couldn't just get a cup of coffee or a cup of water. You had to stand and listen to the entire story. So what about that person?
Well, that's where communication comes into play, and maybe having an uncomfortable conversation comes into play. Because when things like that are going on, where it's interrupting everybody's work, then a conversation needs to be had with that person. So that's another thing that
You don't want to hurt someone's feelings, though. But
well, like you said, if it's interrupting the work of the team, that's that's the team is sacrificing now their work because of this one person's feelings. And we're all adults, and if you can't have that kind of conversation with someone on the team, then maybe they shouldn't be on the team. Because I think a lot of people, and I'm guilty of this too, attach so much of their identity to their work and maybe behaviors that they do that are not who they are. It's just what they're doing or what their job description is. So if someone has, emotional intelligence enough to separate their work from a behavior and is able to have a conversation with someone and say, hey, look, I'm trying to get XYZ done right now. I'd be happy to talk to you about that after work or maybe tomorrow, but I really need to get this done right now. I don't think that's an offensive thing to say. And if somebody feels like that's offensive, then that's another conversation that needs to be had. So I feel like if we're tiptoeing around one person's feelings, that's a problem.
Well, the other person that I have seen in other types of office environments is that person who is similar except for doesn't really waste as much as they bring the toxicity into the room.
Toxicity, yeah.
And they have a negative attitude about everything.
Yes.
And you know that whatever you might say or whatever might happen work-wise, they're going to look at it with that negative spin. And
that
sometimes you just don't want to hear that.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a situation where you can start by addressing it with that person specifically. But if it's something that, again, is affecting the whole team, then that's a conversation that needs to be had with, someone who's leading
Tell
the team.
Boss on them.
I would start with them specifically.
Yeah.
And if nothing changes, because I've been in workplaces where toxic behavior was tolerated by leadership for the sake of performance. Meaning there was a salesperson who was bringing in a lot of money, but they were having full-on shouting matches with ownership in the hallway where that was tolerated and expletives were used. But if somebody else had done that, it wouldn't have been tolerated. So that's where you kind of have to make some hard decisions, because when that person is gone, it raises everybody up and it raises the morale of the whole team up. You can and that's the kind of situation. It's kind of like breaking up with a toxic boyfriend or girlfriend. When they're gone and you get a little bit of distance from the situation, you can see, oh my goodness, I can't believe that we did that for so long. And it's kind of like breathe a sigh of relief. But there is, the sometimes hard decisions have to be made when there's that one person that's kind of dragging everybody down.
Well, speaking of toxic team members, since in the last few months, or really few years, as there's been a lot more emphasis on social media, there's been times where, and I see it more and more, whether they're young or whether they're old, somebody captures something that somebody did, and then it goes back to their boss and they see it. Or there was a girl who recently had a recent graduate who had accepted a job offer, and the job offer was taken back because of something that she did on social media. But what I'm thinking of right now is a young man who over on the west coast of Florida got in a shouting situation at an older person who was cautioning him because he was in a Costco without a face mask, and the rule was that you had to wear a face mask, and he started screaming at them and cursing at them, and someone caught it on video. And then the next thing you know is the video goes viral. People recognize the young man, and his place of business says he no longer works there and pulls his bio down off the website. So you kind of got to think that somebody like that probably already had a few attitude problems, right?
I'm sure that wasn't his employer's first glimpse of what his character is. I'm sure that they weren't, and I can't say, but I'm sure that that's not the first.
Well, you would just think that if somebody did that over something that was a minor comment, that they probably, in a high pressure situation, might have said something to a client or a coworker or something.
Yeah, that's going to show up in the workplace for sure at some point.
So, but my point is that in today's world, with everybody having a cell phone and everybody having the ability to post somewhere on something, that your performance is way more than what it is in the office.
Yeah.
Is you're judged on more than what you are in the office.
That is true. Social media has made this a much smaller world, and everything we do ends up being everywhere. But I always heard a saying, and I'm going to paraphrase, would my mom be proud of what I'm doing right now? And this is before I grew up before the internet, so
Yeah, I did too.
if
well,
I'm
well
out
below.
somewhere, and that's kind of how I was taught to conduct myself, is this something my mom would approve of or not? What would mom think, basically? And so I think, people might say, well, why should they care what I'm doing? But it's like you said, if that's what somebody is doing outside of the office, then some of that's going on inside of the office too, unless they're leading to completely double lives. So who we are at work and who we are outside of work is kind of being exposed everywhere because of the internet. And as I've said to other people before, yes, we have freedom of speech, but there's always consequences to everything that we do. And if your company thinks, this is not in line with our values or who we are, then they have the ability to make decisions based on that. But I kind of conduct myself in it even before. Now it's like you have to kind of assume that everyone's going to pull out a phone and video everything that you're doing. So it's a different world. But I've always thought, would my mom approve of what I'm doing right now? I guess that's kind of the same thing as thinking, if somebody caught this on video.
Well, I got to the point on the other end of the spectrum where I started thinking, would my kids be proud of what I said or what I did or how I acted? Would it be something that would be a story that they would be proud to tell? And one of the things that, as workplaces become more casual, or even you're working at home casual, language can become more casual too. And I just see that as another possibility for people having 2 different types of personalities or 10 different types of personalities, because everybody's language is a little bit different. For 8 years, I worked in the school system as a teacher. And there were times where my internal dialogue did not match what came out of my mouth.
Ooh, I want to be inside your head, Sue Ellen.
And I had to learn to make sure that internal dialogue stayed inside.
Yeah.
And there were things that were really in a adult environment, when you're not molding young minds, that language would be like things like idioms, where you toss something off and you don't think anything about it. But even saying things like pissed off, for example.
Ooh, Sue Ellen.
I know that's like, and what's funny is the first time I said it, and I was trying to be young and with it for my children, and somebody pointed out really what it meant, and I was like, oh no. So part of it might be naive, but there's so many things that you say coming into the workplace or coming into your home workplace, so many different personalities, so many different people that you're bringing in, your whole body, your whole how did you describe it? You as a whole person,
Right.
not just the part of you that
That's at work.
that is the marketing
Right.
person or the um, the fiscal person, and that's kind of what makes the office work better, is because you're whole people working together for a common goal. And then when it's good, it's really, really good.
Yes. Yes.
So how do we get there?
Well, you have to kind of decide as a team, and it's so custom to each different work culture. You talk about language and casual, and that can depend on your culture. Maybe you decide as a team, this is what we're comfortable with, and what how we're going to operate. And so that's why hiring is so important. And I saw a quote somewhere that said, hire character and train skill. I think we talked about that a little bit last time.
Yeah.
And so skills you can teach, but character is kind of inherent to who you are already as a person. So that guy who was screaming at Costco probably has mad skills in whatever he was doing, but maybe his character is not something you'd want to bring into your existing work culture. So that's why hiring and kind of crafting your culture around what you decide as an organization your values are, and bringing in people who are on board with those values, that's where you talk about the common goal and feeling purpose in our work. It kind of drives the whole team. And so you have to make sure everybody's in the same place and kind of is going to be fueled by that purpose. And so that's why hiring and onboarding is so important.
Well, and the whole job interview, the questions with the job interview have changed so much over the years. It used to be, how many words per minute could you type, and what skills did you have, what computer skills, or what was your background, what was your degree, what were your grades. And now it's come so far from there. Nobody asks, how you did in school anymore, because how you did in school grade-wise is not predictive of how you're going to perform in the workplace. But I noticed that one of the common questions that I've either asked as a boss to be, or one of my children has dealt with on a job interview, or I've dealt with, is, tell me about a time where you had an issue with your boss and how you handled it, or you had an issue with a coworker and how you handled it. And I know, especially some of the more volatile people might say, oh, this is an opportunity to show how much more I knew than Jack did and what I did. And then I went and told Jack's boss that he didn't know anything and I could do it better. This is an opportunity for me to show that I'm better. But it's really, they didn't really care about that you knew more than Jack did about your job. They cared how you handled that communication.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's more telling because people lie in job interviews. Newsflash.
No.
So I think it's more telling to ask questions that are less about their professional background and more just about who they are as people. That's going to be indicative of their character.
So like what?
Well, like even just having an easy conversation. Like, tell me about how would your best friend describe you? That can be a telling answer in a lot of different ways depending on how you answer it.
I don't have any best friends.
See? Well,
or
that
I
might
have
be
so many friends, I couldn't really tell you who was my best.
I think it can depend on, again, what kind of person you're looking for to fit into your culture is going to determine what kind of questions you ask. And talking to the team about that is a great way to come up with questions. And there's no set of, here's the 10 questions you should ask on every job interview that you conduct as an employer, because every work culture is unique and every business is unique and every person is unique. So it just depends what you've got going on in your work culture, what your values are, and what you're looking for. And that's something you talk about with the team, maybe somebody who's had the job before, or if it's a new job, what you as a team, people who will be working directly with this person. But that it can be really hard to, you never know until you kind of bring somebody in what they're truly made of and who they are sometimes, because like I said, people lie.
So that's why you have a probationary period quite frequently,
and maybe,
even if you call it something else.
And maybe you bring in somebody, have a second interview with somebody on the team who maybe isn't in a leadership position, but you think is a good judge of character, to just talk to them for 5 minutes and ask them what they think. There's all kinds of different things you can do and so many different ways you can do it. It just depends what you want your end result to be and who you want to bring into the culture.
So my daughter was approached by a recruiter who was kind of, he wanted her to get the job that he was asking her to apply for. And she already has a job. And she doesn't live in the area, so I can talk about it. And he said that what they're looking for is passion. They would like to see her passion. Well, how do you display passion in a job interview?
Tell me something you're passionate about. That's what I would ask them. And then if somebody asks me to talk about something I'm passionate about, I can get loud and I get very physical when I talk, and you can kind of not just hear it in my voice, but visibly see when I'm passionate about something. And not everybody gets like that when they talk about something that they're passionate about. But if you ask them, tell me something that you're passionate about, you can kind of see how that kind of drive is there, what kind of drive that they have.
And how they might work something out one way or another in a positive or negative fashion. Wendy, I know that you send a online newsletter out, but people have to subscribe to it.
Yes, they do.
And it's completely free.
It's completely free. And not only is the newsletter free, but when you sign up for the newsletter, when you go to my website at yourhappyworkplace.com, you also get a free hiring and onboarding guide called Finding Your Person, and it has 10 tips for hiring and onboarding. And you also get a free little quiz about whether or not, how happy is your workplace is the quiz. So,
and then the newsletter is something that, kind of keeps people interested in. But so after, say, post-pandemic, whenever it's going to end, people want to hire you to come in and evaluate the workplace, because actually there could be some challenges in getting everybody back in the office, and having everybody get used to working with people other than their children and their dogs. And Zoom.
Yes. I have 2 ways that people can work with me right now. And the first one is called Culture Shift Strategy Sessions. And that's kind of a mini version of my longer 1-month program, where we work together to talk about what specific things you have going on with your work culture, what changes you're thinking of doing. And that may be, how are we going to transition everybody back to work? How can we do that safely? What other things do I need to be thinking about? And so we talk about that and come up with a custom strategy for that. And then there's also my 1-month program, which is more of a deeper dive into the team as the whole, where I work with the entire team about what you've got going on with your work culture in terms of communication and hiring and onboarding and workplace wellness. We talk about 10 different categories and come up with a much more detailed custom plan on how they can improve their culture.
Can you use what you learn about making your workplace more congenial and apply it to your family?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Or vice versa.
Anytime you have a group of people that meets regularly, there exists a culture. So you have a family culture, you have a work culture. If you're a student, you have a culture at school. And so all of these kind of, communication is huge in any culture, and with family, that can be a huge thing. So yes, all of the things that I talk about and tips when I come up with the custom action plans can absolutely be translated to families and anywhere else that you have a group of people that form a culture.
So there are a lot of positives to getting your newsletter and taking your advice. Not to mention the fact that you always dress in bright, pretty colors and tend to look at things with a positive attitude, and that's really important right now because we talk about life changing and being in a situation that we don't have control of, but we do have control of is our attitude.
Absolutely. Yeah. Our actions and our thoughts. Those are the only things we can control.
Well, Wendy Conrad has been my guest today, and she is with Your Happy Workplace. And you could get more information by going to yourhappyworkplace.com, and you could reach her in that way. You've been listening to the Sue Ellen Sanders Show, and I'm here every weekend with information and events and whatnot. Thanks for listening today, and have a great week.
Archives of the Sue Ellen Sanders Show can be seen on YouTube. Go to youtube.com and look for WPSL TV. Listen in on the weekends and look at the schedule at WPSL.com for the Sue Ellen Sanders Show on WPSL Port St. Lucie.